Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce, and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, and our distinguished guests your questions live using hashtag DisrupTV, and we will do our best to answer them. It's my privilege to introduce my co-host. He's the CEO, founder of Constellation Research, best-selling author of book titled Disrupting Digital Business, regular contributor to Harvard Business Review, ZDNet, and now on TV on CNBC, Fox Business, and other major media outlets. In my humble opinion, one of the top futures to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with my awesome co-host and founder, Vala Afshar. He's one of the top followers on Twitter for CMOs, CIOs, but more importantly, for excellent business advice. He's an author himself. He's also one of the top evangelists in the world on technology, a global speaker and keynote and panelist and moderator, and also on TV himself. But this show is really not about us. This show is really about our awesome guests, what they're doing, how they're changing the world, the transformation that's ahead of us. So who do we have today?
Ray, it's our privilege to have Tim O'Keefe, Chief Executive Officer at Symmons Industries, as our first guest. As CEO and part of the third generation family ownership of Symmons Industries, Tim is leading Symmons' evolution from a mechanical plumbing manufacturer to a digital water solution provider. Tim's career started at Symmons as an information analyst in 2002. He was then appointed director of design, where the team created custom products for world-renowned properties that led to a triple-digit CAGR business growth. In 2008, Tim was promoted to the role of executive vice president, where he was responsible for day-to-day activities of sales, operations, engineering, and marketing. 2 years later, Tim was appointed in his current role as chief executive officer of Symmons. Most recently, he's led the development and the launch of Symmons Water Management, a revolutionary platform that changes how properties manage their water to drive lower cost and increase revenue. I met Tim several years ago, and we were having these intense, in-depth discussions about Internet of Things. All along, I'm thinking he's a scientist, he's a futurist, he's an architect, and he says, hello, I'm a CEO of an 80-year-old plumbing company, which blew me away. Tim is an active member of YPO, Abundance 360, and Constellation Research Business Transformation 150. You can follow his work on Twitter at TOKeefe, KEEFFE 71. Welcome, Tim, to DisrupTV.
Thanks, Vala. Thanks, Ray. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks a lot for being on the show. This has been awesome. I mean, we've been following your journey as you've been building this. But let's talk a little bit about, what is, how'd you get here, right? And get a little overview of the Symmons Water Management and really why customers are really looking for something like this, right, in the transformation conversation.
Yeah, thanks. So, as you said, the intro, we're a third generation family business. We're your typical plumbing manufacturer. So we make all the things that are metal in your bathroom, faucets, showers, accessories, and controllers in the basement. So about 5-7 years ago, we started to build out an innovation program and really try to understand what kind of value we could create for our customers. And we focused on the hospitality segment first, because those customers have been more adept at adopting new innovative technologies and really driving value for their customers. And what we found after about a year of really digging into the root causes of their issues and finding out what the jobs to be done to deliver on their mission was that at the end of the day, water was causing issues for them. It was not a positive situation. And really what it stems from was that water is really a black box. So if you think about it, when an issue occurred, they heard about it and they had to react to it to try to fix it. And they're always up against it every time. And most importantly, the alert that they got that the system broke was from their guests, which is the worst of all situations. The person who pays the bill was alerting them. So this black box was impacting them and causing them for degradation of profits and revenues and time, as well as hurting their guest experience and their customer experience. So we built a system of software, sensors and software that literally helps them understand what's going on with their water management system. So it helps them deliver on the guest experience to ensure that guest gets hot water and the right shower, to reduce operational expenses. And finally, and probably most importantly, avoid like rogue water events that have a huge detrimental impact on the hotel.
Wow. And, you know, I mean, right now, I mean, like almost every hotel I check in, I see your stuff there. And for this, what you're really trying to do is trying to improve that experience from a hospitality perspective, but also, I mean, you're doing something bigger. It's more than just, you know, the customer experience. There's water management here, right, in the back end that people really don't realize. I mean, what kind of problems do, you know, institutions typically face?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So if you think about it, a building comes down to sort of two core elements. They have the mechanical room where all the water is delivered up into the building, into the rooms. And then they have the risers in return. So imagine those as being the roads that the water travels on. And so what we found is that some folks had solutions that focused on the mechanical room, which is where the water is, you know, developed and heated and brought into the building. But no one had a solution that looked at the whole building or a holistic platform that was really trying to understand what happened when it left the mechanical room and went up into the building. And that's what we've achieved. So what we did is we said we're going to put sensors on the risers, the returns, and the mechanical room to use all those different relationships between where the water is delivered and brought into the building and then how it's delivered up to the guest or to the room. And that's the real problem is really actually when it leaves the mechanical room. You know, if you said, geez, my temperature is 104 degrees in the mechanical room, it's like, well, great, but the guest upstairs is having a bad day, and thus you're reimbursing them for that bad shower. So it's a huge problem. It comes out to be in the top 5 of almost every hotel complaint survey. So it's a real driver of negative profitability.
Wow. So Tim, you know, for someone like yourself that has an analytical background, a design background, and obviously strong business acumen where you recognize very early on that we're now in an experience-led economy, and I will switch a hotel from one to another if my water pressure is low or the temperature is not where I want it to be. So there's so many more choices and options that you know the consumer today will define and give their money to companies that consistently deliver a good experience. How did you, or talk to us about how you take your vision, again, I consider you like a CEO that's a futurist. How did you convince your stakeholders, again, in a company that's a digital immigrant company, you weren't born in the cloud, you weren't born mobile, you weren't born social, to really think about data and sensors and going from reactive to proactive to even building your anticipatory muscle where you're designing for serviceability before the paying customers tapping you on the shoulder asking for help. How did you go about really creating this mindset in your company?
Yeah, I would say that it's a journey, not to sound like using a cliche or anything, but at the end of the day, I think it takes sort of two things: perseverance and curiosity. You know, along the way, there's going to be plenty of people that will tell you, you know, you can't do this, it'll never work. And some of those people are on your team, and that's okay. You know, one of the things I've learned along the way is to have more patience, because not everyone sees it the same way I see it. And I think early on, I'm like, come on, it's the greatest idea of all time. You guys got to jump on board with this. But the perseverance is really to take each and every time you run into one of those roadblocks or someone says you can't do it, and to keep pushing on through. And if you can maintain that level of passion and you can keep driving it, eventually as you prove it out, going from a proof of concept into sort of selling the first customer, you can really start to get the momentum. And the curiosity, it's kind of almost like one of our core values. It's to try to remain curious on day, you know, right now I've worked on this for 7 years. So on the 7th year, as much as day one, you know, how curious you were when you came up with the original idea, and to try to instill that into your team. Because if you can remain curious, what's really cool about this is once you get going, the iteration and the velocity of change of the ideas, going from a traditional manufacturer of plumbing products to a sort of digital and software and solutions provider, the pace of change is much faster. What Ray references in his book and what you guys talk about all the time, our ability now to make a change to this system and deliver a new value or a new feature to our customer is unbelievable. And so once you get that momentum, you really have it. But I will say early on, there's plenty of doubters along the way. You know, I was just presenting a couple weeks ago in Tampa, and some guy said, you know, I really don't think you're going to be able to do all this with AI and all these other things. And I said, you know, I really appreciate your support, but we're going to keep at it. And, you know, we'll come back and we'll show you how it works. So, you know, I didn't dispute it, because all feedback is a gift.
That's right. That's right.
You know,
in Moneyball, the last line towards the end of the movie, the first through the wall is always the bloodiest. So what you're doing is truly innovative, truly disruptive thinking. So expect those bruises along the way. Yeah. Curiosity and perseverance. Absolutely.
Those are definitely all true. And actually, but you started much earlier, right? I mean, you've been working at this in iterations, right? You had the innovation lab, which I had a chance to visit in Braintree, and that's pretty interesting in terms of how you work. I mean, this isn't, I mean, the way you're approaching this has elements of from design thinking all the way to business model design. I mean, you've explored all different types of agencies. You've worked with all different types of consulting firms. I mean, you've really pulled together multiple disciplines together. How do you convince, like, how do other CEOs convince like their boards and their teams that this is a great idea and get them along? Because on the board end, I mean, you're typically dealing with, I mean, you don't always have patient shareholders, and on your team side, you don't always have the skill sets in place. How did you create that balance?
Yeah, I think, I had to learn, like I said earlier, patience, because, I just assume everyone jump in and come along with it. I've been fortunate to have a partner in crime that's managed this innovation program from day one with me. She still actually worked with me, which is amazing in that regard, because I'm a little bit crazy. But having that patience and understanding where you're getting that feedback or that pushback was key. And I think the second thing is kind of like, Jim Collins talks a lot about firing bullets versus cannonballs. We fired a lot of bullets and we've learned a lot, and I've run through that wall and hit my head. We have pivoted. I remember being at a startup in 1999. There was no such thing as pivot. It was called let's stay in business. So let's move to the next. So, we started off with a product that was in the room, and today we're looking at a holistic water management platform. So we have kind of continuously taken those iterations and learned from them. I think that was key, whether it was working with one firm or the next. We'd switch firms. That wasn't, really their fault. It was just us trying to figure out what value we could create. And it's, we're in the earliest days. There's so much uncertainty, and you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable and really just embrace it. And so, to me, it was just about firing those smaller shots, getting that feedback, and then understanding what you could move forward with, and then using that to get even more learnings. Because if we had made one big bet and launched, it would have been ugly. But that's really the key learnings, is take those small shots and continue to iterate off of them.
Tim, tell us about this water management system. How do you speak to an operational executive at some of these world-renowned establishments that you've installed your platform? How do you start the conversation and give them a sense of what it is that you bring to the table that's unique in the industry?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do and what we're saying to our customers is that we want to take water off your plate. So the future vision would be water as a service, and I can go into that in a little bit. But really, when you think about it, what we're trying to do is take something that's a problem for them today and turn it into something that doesn't become a problem, but actually is positive. So it's delivering on that guest experience. It's reducing your operational cost. It's avoiding rogue events. There's a lot of events that occur in these buildings, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's the worst day you could ever imagine. It's like, it's happened twice this year. The mechanical room shuts down, or there's a flood in the mechanical room, or there's just lots of different things that everyone has to jump to kind of react to, and that just wastes a ton of money. So there's a lot of different audiences we talk to owner developers, and they can see it, but they really obviously have a heavy lens towards ROI. You talk to the chief engineer and that GM that are sitting in that hotel every day, they get it right away because they know the challenges they face. Just like anyone who's day-to-day and delivering on that value and having to watch that bottom line, they know if they can take this off their plate, they can really drive the guest experience in other ways. So that engineer that was deployed to fix water issues is now deployed fixing a guest experience issue or improving upon the guest experience. So it has this almost exponential impact. It's taking that cost down and smoothing out your organization, but also redeploying those assets that are running in your hotel to really deliver a great experience. And that's just hotels. We've started to think about healthcare. We started to think about schools, multifamily, co-location sites and server farms. Think of all the air conditioning going into those sites. So there's just tons of opportunity for this.
Tim, more and more, every executive that I have the privilege of meeting with is thinking about and shaping and delivering a narrative that has sustainability as a core value. So when I think of water management, not only the pressure, temperature, and serviceability, but also the ability to conserve water usage in order to have a more healthier, greener, more sustainable environment. Do you find that in the hospitality space, are the executives mindful of differentiating their value proposition to their guests in terms of managing water so that we're not as wasteful as we are today, and perhaps through loyalty systems or some sort of recognition encouraging better use and perhaps minimal consumption of water rather than just turning on the shower for 10 minutes before you use it. And the wasteful use of water that most of us, recognize today.
Yeah, I would say that it's a real focus of the brands. So the Marriotts, the Hyatts, the Hiltons, they really want to establish themselves as being green leaders because that's their customer, what their customer wants, whether it's younger generation or today. I would say that owner developers see the value of water savings, but in some areas, the water savings, the dollars aren't there. But one of the things we've noticed with this system, again, it's putting sensors in the mechanical room, the risers and the returns, is that we've seen a couple of things. A huge waste of BTUs, so energy. So people are heating water 10, 20, and 30 degrees higher than they need to. And once you optimize the system, that energy comes right back to you. So it's energy going out the door. The second is that when you can't deliver the hot water at the right moment in time to the customer, that customer is just going to leave it on. And you're just wasting gallons upon gallons. So we had one customer in Boston, for 6 months, it was taking 10 minutes to deliver to one section of the hotel. That's 6 months of wasted water, 6 months of wasted BTUs. And so we're seeing a lot of those benefits and we're starting to calculate them out. And they are having real world impact. And when you start to think about that at 100 hotels, 1,000 hotels, and the data will be massive in terms of the impact. Wow. And it's just, at the end of the day, it's really about optimizing and using intelligence. We firmly believe here that products should do more for you than you do for them. And so the only way we can do that is to make the product intelligent. You can't leave a pipe or a valve and think a mechanical valve is going to tell you what to do. If we can bring intelligence and information to those products, we can create more value and thus create better operations and then impact the environment positively.
Makes total sense.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, so what's the technology here, right? You've got sensors in place. You've got something probably doing some level of AI or something analytics in the background. But tell us a little bit more about what that does and what do people do to install this?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of key things we learned on the install starting off right away was a hotel is not going to shut off their water system to allow us to put our sensors in. So it had to be non-invasive. And that's great. We can go to existing buildings, we can go to new construction. The second was Wi-Fi is a big issue for them. We're delivering Wi-Fi to your customer. That's important to the customer. So they did not want us on their network. So we provide our own proprietary Symmons connection gateway running on LoRa. And we have sensors, which basically are a CPU and then a cable that attaches to the pipe. So it attaches non-invasively, and we measure that temperature every 10 seconds. We also put in that CPU to take advantage of future features, a humidity sensor and an ambient temperature sensor. I won't get into all the specifics of it, but what you can imagine is when you triangulate those three pieces of data, you can really come up with anomalies that no one in the world's ever seen before. When you start to apply AI to that, it's even better. So those sensors are attached to the risers, returns, and then in a typical hotel in the mechanical room, you might have 10 to 15 of them. So those are all the temperature sensors. And they're not just measuring temperature. They're predicting anomalies of the source of water. Is it coming at the right time? Is it flowing through? Do we have an issue with one section of the building? And then in the mechanical room as well, we provide a leak detection system because what we've seen is there's large CapEx in those rooms, huge machines that deliver the water, the pumps, the controllers. And so if you have a leak in there, you can't shut things off. It shuts the whole building off. And so what we do is we detect a leak within 1 minute and send an alert to you. And we've seen just in our 5 POCs in Boston, a year ago, it happened in 3 of the 5. We're now in 38 hotels in Boston. It is one of the bigger alerts we get. So we have been installing since May 1. We have 38 hotels actively on the system, over 7,000 rooms just in the Boston market. So we're focused on the Boston market just to get the first initial launch right, to get the post-installation service down, and then we're going to go out nationally in November, December timeframe.
Now this spawns off a whole bunch of other business models, right? Because what you're able to do now is you're doing the operational efficiency, you're doing remote monitoring and diagnostics, right? Yeah. And at some point, you can get to the point you were talking about water as a service. So let's go deep a little bit on the water as a service and what that means. And then we'll talk a little bit about, your personal journey here. So as well.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, if you think about it really, whether it's a vision or purpose, so we consider ourselves to be a purpose-driven company. And at Symmons, our purpose is to reimagine how water is used and managed. So what does that mean? Like, how can we make water as a service? So in this first version, it's informative. This is a piece of information that comes in and creates an insight, which creates an action. That lowers operational costs, it saves water, energy, delivers a guest experience, like I said. A next version could take active control. So you could control those same systems with your phone or your desktop or from a virtual control center. So an ownership group could like monitor their water from a hub. And then finally, if you sort of think about it, we could evolve into an autonomous water management system where you would have dynamic controllers that are connected and dynamic pumps in the risers and returns, as well as dynamic valves, all talking to each other and linked to each other. And based on that, they're using the history and the data and the AI without human intervention, just running the water at the optimal speed, at the optimal temperature, and delivering what the guest needs or the user needs. So that's kind of our evolution. When we think about water as a service, that's the technology. We could then go out and start to buy water on behalf of our customers. And by buying the water, we could aggregate all that water spend up, get the price reduced for them, transparently show it to them, and just deliver water as a service. They would just pay us a monthly fee that would come with the technology, the alerts, the system, the AI, and the water being bundled. And if you think about it, that's an ultimate solution for an owner that says, I never have to think about water again because Symmons is taking care of it.
That is incredible. And I'm telling you, if you're following, the World Economic Forum and all of the news and facts and forecasts regarding water scarcity, and the impact of climate change, there are research papers that are being discussed widely that the future wars will be because of water. The scarcity of water and the negative impact in North America, in Africa, in Asia. And again, there's news every day about, there's, one of the most technologically sound cities in India right now has incredible water scarcity where they're shipping water to Chennai in trains at incredible volumes, and they still cannot meet the demands of the citizen population. So being able to optimally manage water distribution, leveraging machine learning and AI capabilities in this dynamic setting that you're talking about is to me it's a necessity. It's not a luxury. You need to be thinking about it.
Yeah, I'll just play off of that and say, I like to use a phrase, and it ties to our purpose. Like I said earlier, Symmons' purpose is to reimagine how people use and manage water. And so when you think about that, I like to say local impact, global water. So what does that mean? So we're in North America, we're rolling out this in the Boston market. So a hotel improves its situation in the Boston market. They've reduced energy costs, reduced water, they're saving money for their company. That engineer has had an impact locally, but it obviously affects globally. That impact will also be felt globally because what we're really excited to announce, we haven't settled on the organization yet, but we're going to take a portion of our profits and donate them to organizations bringing clean water to the developing world. So think about it again, that local customer is having an impact on water, but at the same time impacting water globally because that profitability and that donation could bring water to create a well for 250 people that never had clean water, all tying back to our purpose to radically reimagine how water is used and managed. So we're trying to think about this to not just be the technology platform and the ability to create efficiencies, but to have it tie it together globally. We're not a global company today. In the future, we could be. And I when talking to Ray, he's like, why aren't you here? Why aren't you there? Ray's always challenging me to fly around the world and set up pilots. So.
You know what? This has been amazing.
Go
ahead, Aubrey. Go ahead, Vala.
700 million people, that's twice the population of the US, not have access to clean drinking water. And if you read the Gates Notes Foundation from Bill Gates this week, 1 billion people don't have access to electricity. So we're in the Boston market. We're incredibly fortunate to, to not think about these things as issues, but frankly, 1/10 of humanity doesn't have access to clean water. 700 million and 7.7 billion on Earth. So these are real important issues, and it takes forward-looking CEOs that manage purposeful, oriented culture in companies to contribute to betterment of society. So I appreciate what you're doing.
I was gonna say, Tim, this has been amazing. To watch the journey, to really pull people together around this. You're in an old line industry that you're transforming at a digital pace, and definitely someone that a lot of folks would love to talk to and learn from. So But real quick, last question on my end really is, as people are thinking about business transformation, you talked about patience being an important skill set, but there are other things as well that people don't really, people don't really realize when they embark on an effort like this. You started this 6 to 7 years ago when the technology wasn't as good. You started when a lot of the business models weren't even well understood, right? And now you've finally got it to a point where you're ready. You've got the launch out, you've got the pilots in place, you're happy. If people are starting this process, other than patience, what else would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say, don't be afraid to leap forward and try this, because look, we're a small, family business in the New England market, and we're a Northeast company. We sell internationally around 2%. So, if we can go out and try to drive this kind of change, I think it's possible for anyone. And I think one of the things I've learned along the way of knowing you guys for the last 5 to 7 years, just the pace of technology I always knew would kind of come along with us and help us develop these things. What I'm astounded by is that it was much faster than I thought, and that the systems are much more active and capable now than they were a year ago, 3 years ago. And so I would say to anyone exploring this, the two things you have to have are just the ability to embrace uncertainty and be comfortable being uncomfortable, and having your team feel that way. Because if you can encourage them to make mistakes, you encourage them to go out there and try things, you'll really come up with some amazing value. I think one of the quotes I like to use, and my team will probably be a little mad at using this, but Willy Wonka says, I hate the suspense, or the suspense is killing me. I hope it continues. It's a contrast, but you do have to be able to embrace that suspense, because while you're doing this, it's going to be uncertain. It's not going to feel great. And so you have to embrace that suspense and just move to the next thing and move to the next thing. So I would just say, don't be afraid to take the leap, because the technology will help you get there. And if you can embrace uncertainty and you can be comfortable being uncomfortable, you'll get there eventually.
Terrific advice. Terrific.
Wow, we're here. Wise words from Tim O'Keefe, Chief Executive Officer at Symmons Industries. You can follow him at T O'Keefe, KEFFE 71 on Twitter. And of course, you're listening to us coast to coast here, as well as internationally on podcasts on DisrupTV show. Thanks a lot, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Congratulations. What an extraordinary CEO. I remember Ray talking to him years ago. And again, before I knew his role and function, I really thought I was talking to an analyst and a technologist. So it's pretty awesome to see. And his company was founded in 1939, so an 80-year-old company. And he is, well on his way in terms of trailblazing, digital transformation. Speaking of a trailblazer and one of our favorite guests to come back to DisrupTV, we are here with Heather Clancy, Editorial Director at GreenBiz Group. Heather is an award-winning journalist specializing in transformative technology and innovation and sustainability. Great segue after talking to Tim. Heather is the co-author of Niche Down, How to Become Legendary by Being Different. This is an Amazon category queen for entrepreneurship and small business. As editorial director of GreenBiz, Heather covers the role of technology in enabling clean energy, sustainable business strategy, and low carbon economy. You can follow Heather on Twitter at GreenTechLady, GreenTechlady. Welcome back, Heather, to DisrupTV.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you today?
Great. Great now that you're here. Great.
I've been here the whole time, lurking.
What did you think of Tim? That's pretty cool. Plumbing company.
Well, the thing is that so many of the things that we need to do for sustainability are so basic. It's the plumbing, it's the grid, it's and that's what makes it so difficult, because it's systemic, right? But I love the practical reality of what he was saying on, you want to do this, but you can't disrupt. You can't make it inconvenient. I was listening with interest to the comments about temperature, and because I'm like one of these people that I really need a hot shower, but I'm also guilty of the you turn it on and it's not coming on. Then you're like, okay, let's run the sink too to see if it can make it hotter. I've been there so many times. You know how that happens, and you're like, why did it come up now? The sink is anyway. So I think it's wonderful, and the way you make it transparent and behind the scenes, I think, is also super important. So if it's just automated to be optimized. No one really notices. They don't have to do anything. If they want to override the setting, they're gonna, but probably if it's not bothering them, they won't do anything. So I appreciate what they're doing. And your comments about the age of the company, I think were really profound, because if you look at some of the organizations that are actually having a big impact and trying to make themselves more sustainable, a lot of them have been around for decades. And that sort of thinking is built into the sort of constant evolution is built into their management capabilities, which, you know, if you look at startups versus can an established company make this sustainability transition, they're the ones that have been around and have that sort of management discipline built into place are actually probably going to be pretty darn successful if they're focused on it, if they make it part of their culture. I think that's, you know, and I'll embarrass you, Vala, by saying, like, if it's part of the culture, Salesforce has made this part of the culture. And if it's part of the culture, it's going to happen. Everyone has to be bought in, from employee to customer. So I'm sorry, I kind of went on a total tangent, but that's what I do. And that's why you asked me back.
I wonder, like, if Tim wasn't the CEO, could he bring that culture of sustainability and
no.
Yeah, you know.
No, and that's the other point important. And I'll say to you that one of the reasons, and again, I don't want to embarrass you, but your company, Salesforce, happens to be particularly effective at this, and part of it is because their CEO is totally bought in. Unilever made really important strides.
Yeah.
He was bought in and talked about it. Mars is focusing on completely making this part of their culture, and the CEO is bought in. You have to have a C-suite champion. If it's not the CEO, maybe it's the CFO, which is really important too, by the way. I see there's so many really, really effective chief sustainability officers that have done a lot for their companies and made a lot of important progress in certain elements because they've gone to the right C-suite champion. But the companies that kind of have made it part of their ethos and thinking are the ones that I personally believe it's going to be embedded, right? It can't be a separate function. If it's over on the side, then it's never going to get the proper attention at the operational level that it needs to have. So at the very least, in the C-suite, it has to have support. The CEO is just a bonus, you know, if they're out there talking about it and talking about it, not just because it's a good marketing point,
right.
You know. So
definitely a great case study here. At some point, if you want to connect with them, it's pretty amazing. But let's talk about Kearney Point. You're talking about this green infrastructure that's happening next door to you. I was actually up here in Montana. I actually saw Platinum Leads building go up. That they launched here at Montana State University, where they basically put up an engineering building with Platinum LEED certification in a very cold weather climate. So it's kind of interesting.
This is Kearney Point.
Kearney Point in New Jersey. What's going on there?
Yeah, I know. I have to ask how to pronounce it too, but Kearney, New Jersey. So Kearney Point in New Jersey is a site that used to be the location of a historic shipyard. So I can't remember the name of the company right now, but one of the big U.S. sort of steel companies have this site. It's about 130 acres on the Hackensack River in a lovely place of industrial district of Kearney, which is very near Jersey City, Newark, sort of on the water system that was so important for the industrial activities in New Jersey. And they used to build ships there. I mean, I think at one point it was like 5 in a week. I mean, it was just the most important shipyard for the United States. Established in World War I, really hit its peak in World War II. And then as shipbuilding kind of moved offshore, if you will, became much less relevant and sort of eventually found its way into recycling ships. So what better use of a facility that made ships that's kind of on the way out than to dismantle ships. So, and that was just for perspective, this site has been established about 100 years ago. So it was in 1917. In the 60s, a company called Hugo New, it's a real estate developer in New Jersey, privately held, bought this site. And they originally did a lot of recycling on the site. They were involved with the dismantling and so forth. And then kind of moved, as a lot of the New Jersey industrial sites did, into warehousing and distribution, sort of like kind of a, very low key, profitable, but low key business, not a lot of jobs and so forth. So this site kind of became, kind of fell into disrepair, back, it wasn't as important in the area, not as many jobs and so forth. And then Sandy happened. So Superstorm Sandy, 2012, completely whacked the site. So like there was a liquor distribution warehouse there, and it was like $100 million worth of bottles floating around in the rivers. It sounds, I'm not trying to make a joke, but it's like, it's not funny because that company lost a lot of money, but
that's crazy.
The management of the company said, okay, Huguenot said, whoa, this is just not sustainable. We're on this river. Not sea level, but the water levels are rising. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. This is going to happen more often. We know, forget the cause. This is happening. Water levels are rising. They're more unpredictable. So the management of this company, and it's led right now by a woman named Wendy New, decided to completely rethink the site. So it's like it's this wonderful case study with what we would call adaptive infrastructure or green infrastructure. So they're completely rethinking the site. They're building sort of a seawall and living like natural wetlands around it to protect it from the flooding. They're building it up. So they're putting soil back. They're pulling the buildings back from the shore. They're putting green space all over, so it's becoming like a sponge. So those are the natural things they're doing. They're also experimenting with this really incredible stormwater management system. There's a company called, I think it's Abtech. It's like a sponge, right? So it takes the water, it handles it in a different way than other systems. It pulls out and this is important for a site like this, it pulls out contaminants. So metals and other pathogens.
Heavy metals, lead.
Right, exactly, exactly. And so this is a pretty visionary, way to approach something. Like basically, they're taking buildings off the site. So like you could, after a disaster like this, you could think you could understand this company saying, "Oh, we got to get better money out of all these buildings," and just cramming tenants in there. But this organization is pulling back. It's taking buildings out of commission. It's completely rethinking the ones that are there, turning them into really cool office spaces. And it's really being very careful about the tenants. Like if you're a tenant that doesn't have sustainability, a company that doesn't have sustainability at your core, you might not get a lease there. So they're prioritizing vertical farms. There's a laundry facility there they were talking about. It's like a commercial laundry. It uses like something like 20% of the water that other companies use. So they're doing this as a private sector entity, but one of the most really fascinating things is they're also working with the public sector. So they've managed to get grant money from the federal, one of the federal programs, that $3 million to help with a road that leads in and out of this site that really needs to be updated. It's great for the community. It's great for them, right? For their tenants, it's going to make it easier for them to attract tenants to this area. So from their perspective, it's going to be an investment. And then the other thing that they're doing that's pretty cool is that they're going to probably bring back about 10,000 jobs to this site. They're thinking at its peak, this particular location had about 30,000 jobs. So they're not going to get up to that point, but
it's a big U.S. Steel. It was a big U.S. Steel location.
It was a big U.S. Steel location. But I mean, if you think about it, and one of the really cool things they did was they hired a former EPA official to help them navigate the public sector possibilities. Her name is Dominique Lukenhoff, and she's got a real good background in sort of the urban economic, inclusion issues and the programs that can come up to help support a project like this. So it's just this wonderful model of public-private partnership and cooperation. It's certainly just starting. They only have one of the buildings in commission, if you will. But it's just a wonderful demonstration of different sort of thinking, of sustainable thinking, right? They're thinking for the long term. They're not just focused on, hey, how can we cram these many, more tenants into this building? So anyway, it's just and I love that it's in New Jersey, because there's so many areas in New Jersey that they have these great possibilities. I mean, Newark, I don't know if you know this, but a couple of the big vertical farm companies are in Newark and have made quite a few investments there. So the extent to which you can take an urban climate, if you will, and refresh it and nurture it and bring it to a place where maybe it was decades ago, but it hasn't been for a while. I think that's so important.
Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities, right? Especially in urban areas where you also have food deserts to do the work.
Oh, yeah.
Farm to table, you're closing that gap on the food deserts. You're also creating opportunities for creating new skill sets, as well as jobs in areas that would have been probably different types of empowerment zones, and really creating new skill sets.
Well, yeah. So this isn't an opportunity zone. So they are taking advantage of that. I don't know if that's the right term. They're using that program. But yeah, to your point, the food systems around these cities, which is why these vertical farms are there, you want the food to be distributed locally. These things are going to build on a regional basis. You don't want, a vertical farm isn't going to ship its stuff across the country. It's going to ship to the food deserts in its own city and help provide options that the citizens there and the residents didn't otherwise have. So
absolutely. I was a couple of days ago in New York City for their Samsung new product launch event.
The foldable, is it the phone?
Yeah, it was the Galaxy Unpacked event. So it was a new phone, a new tablet, new laptop, bunch of new products. Really incredible technology and innovation. But at the event, as the president of Samsung is talking about all these incredible new innovation produced by Samsung, there was a strong reference and fair amount of time allocated to the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, SDGs. And they talked about, I would think most people in the audience, maybe not aware of the 17 dimensions of sustainability as defined by the UN. And so Samsung talked about, how they're using that framework to ensure that they're producing products with sustainability in mind, and revealed an app that allows them to measure outcomes across these dimensions. How has the narrative, and by the way, it's not the first time that I've heard a company executive talk about or reference the UN framework. So I'm wondering, how much has the narrative changed over the last 2-3 years when companies discuss sustainability and do it in a very rich, very robust manner? Do you see that more and more where, as you mentioned, it has a core value? It can't just be a poster or a marketing gimmick. You really have to measure outcomes and show to your stakeholders that this is a North Star that you're following as you deliver new products and services.
Right. So it is definitely a North Star. And I think you're going to hear more about it because if you think about it, a lot of the companies had 2020 goals set. So they're reaching them or not reaching them, and they're coming out with new ones. So I've seen them pegged to 2025 and 2030. 2030 is the landmark, the milestone year for the Sustainable Development Goals. And so when they were approved and blessed, whatever you want to call it, there were quite a few companies that sort of started talking about, we're going to use them. But not many companies figured out a way to do so. Like they kind of would point to a few goals and say, we can do this poverty one, and we can do this inclusion one, and the women and girls, and the access to electricity, right? Affordable access to water, what sanitary water conditions. They're all part of them. We've talked about these topics, but not a lot of companies yet have a way to really demonstrate it to their stakeholders, if you will, particularly their investing stakeholders. One example of a company that has done a pretty good job, although I will fully disclose, I haven't talked to them about it in a little while, was MasterCard. Right when they first came out, started talking about specific services, right? So business opportunities and new revenue opportunities tied to certain of the goals, like the women, I think in particular, women and girls, and providing credit schemes in different emerging economies that would help these people become entrepreneurs and add to the economy and create an ecosystem that could be ripe for future investment. So that's a great example of a wonderfully holistic, it's a really well integrated thought process.
Right.
I think you will start to see more of that talking. I actually haven't really heard a lot about the tech companies. IBM, I just literally got something from IBM last week. They went through all of their existing sustainability goals, because if you think about it, companies like IBM have had sustainability on their agenda for decades. I mean, I think they were the first one to publish like a corporate social responsibility.
Yeah, they were one of the early ones. Yep.
They were definitely one of the early ones, if not the first one. I mean, like they've literally, I think they just published their like 29th. I mean, hey, that's a lot. Good on you, right? But they went through and said, okay, this framework is this is a public framework. It's what countries are working towards. Where do we stack up against? And they just published a whole thing where they went through and kind of mapped themselves to each of the goals and talked about where there was, again, opportunity. I think that's important. You can't just kind of pick the goals and say, yeah, we're going to do this and this. It has to be tied to your business in some way. So I think the notion that you as a company are going to be able to participate in all 17, it's a great aspiration, but what more likely you're going to see companies have 2 or 3 that they're going to really focus on. And I do believe that you will see them tied to some of the goals that come out this fall and maybe early next year. The tricky part is that there hasn't really been a very good way to measure, like the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, also called the global goals, if you will. There's no like real metrics, like
standard body that
well, there's no metrics, and that's part of the issue, is because companies need to be able to measure. Like if you're going to say you're doing this, you don't want it to become greenwashing. You want it to be meaningful. And so that's where a lot of them are, in all fairness, a lot of the big companies that really feel that they should be participating, which they should, by the way. It is absolutely not going to happen without private sector investment.
Yes.
They're still struggling with, how do I prove this? Like, how do I prove I did something? And it's very difficult for them. So until that happens, the opportunity won't be might not be adopted as readily as it could be. But I do know that there are organizations that are working on trying to make that a better part of the world, if you will. There's an organization called the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. There's also a US counterpart, and they're both kind of working on schemes and frameworks to help companies better measure.
My sense is we're going to hear more from technology companies. Again, I have the good fortune of being in rooms with business,
right,
and I'm hearing it more. So,
well, you mentioned Samsung, like Google this week talked about, right? So it's going to make a better investment. All 100% of made by Google products will include recycled materials by 2022. Okay. They're not saying how much, like what percentage. Okay, 100% of the products will have it, but it's maybe 1%. But with respect, I think they will get more specific when they figure out how they can be. Apple has been talking about this as well, right?
These circular models are really important, right?
They're important.
It's really about zero landfill waste. It's about circular development. It's about making sure everything has a life cycle coming back.
It's about making sure you have the stuff to put in the stuff, right? Because if you're losing that mining, if that lithium goes away or that stuff is not there, then we're not going to get it. So
and more, there's expectation for companies that are champions of, let's say, the SDGs, that they also practice radical transparency, that they speak with specificity, how are they improving education, how are they championing equality, how are they recycling, and what percentage in their new products. So I think more and more, I think society will demand that it's not just talk.
So the Wall Street analysts have to demand it too. P.S. That's part of the biggest issue, is that you don't hear many companies talk about this on their quarterly earnings calls, and until that starts happening, I think the Wall Street thing is a challenge. The institutional investors are putting pressure on it, but we're still missing that part of it.
Right. I agree.
So let's jump into that real quick. Last point, right? This GE BlackRock thing, talking about Wall Street and other folks getting on solar and storage business, right? Isn't one of the biggest challenges with solar just capturing the energy? Like a lot of it just goes to waste. So.
Well, I'm not an expert in the efficiency of solar panels, but what this particular deal says to me, you mentioned there's a good green tech media story on it. It's GE's solar group and BlackRock real assets, which I hadn't actually like, oh, that's cool. Real assets, like what are they not real if they're what are the other assets?
They're tangible, you can touch them. So.
But what makes this particular relationship, if you will, interesting is that it's focused on distributed solar development, and that's actually the name of the company. There actually isn't even a GE in the name, is there? Or a BlackRock, which is kind of cool. It's called Distributed Solar Development, and it's meant to appeal to the companies and industrials and maybe the cities, by the way, that are looking for what they call like distributed solar plus energy storage, right? So, or microgrids, or, you know, assets that make it energy resilient and so forth. And it's the idea that, to go back to Superstorm Sandy, it's the idea that when that happens, notice I said that when, because that's going to be an issue. It's when that you want to have your own, you want to be resilient, you want to be independent, you want to be, and you want to have the ability to make sure that the power stays on, and at the very least to run the emergency services in the area, to make sure that communications stay up and so forth. So this plays into the whole distributed assets that you see going up on Whole Foods, on, you know, Target, Walmart, like all of the big, if you will, a lot of them food companies that have, or retailers that have lots of locations, are using those locations as sort of hubs for community, or thinking about them as hubs. Many of them have already put solar on it. Like, so a lot of Walmart, I forget what the goal was, but there's oodles of Walmarts that have solar. Target, I think those are like 1 and 2. Lots of industrial warehouses have them. If you see like, so a lot of the companies that have logistics capabilities have put them. Now what they're looking to do is to put the storage in place. And what makes this deal interesting is that they're going to own, so the BlackRock money helps them own this asset. So the thing that a community would have an issue doing is making that capital expense. And this helps turn it into an operational opportunity, if you will. They can lease it potentially. They're basically allowing this thing to be built on their site and their real estate, and they're not this, and they're also digestible, if you will. Like, they're not these multi-megawatt power purchase agreements. And as a company, that's a little bit intimidating. This allows smaller companies to kind of get in the act in a way that's meaningful for them. And it just gives another option for potentially investing in solar.
You know, there's so much going on out there, and whenever you need to know what's happening, Heather is the person to talk to. So we're here coast to coast with Heather Clancy, editorial director at GreenBiz Group. You can follow her on Twitter at Green Tech Lady, and of course catch the latest news of what's happening in the world of green tech and what's happening in environment, and more importantly, what's happening in terms of these larger sustainability goals. So thanks a lot for being on the show, Heather.
Bye. Have fun in Montana. Goodbye.
Thank you, Heather.
And for those of you following, make sure you get her book, Niche Down. You're on Kindle Unlimited. Yeah. And if you get a chance, get Heather's book on Kindle, Niche Down. Her co-author Chris Lockett's also going to be on the show in a few weeks from now. So definitely something to catch up on. So
absolutely. And if you're a startup founder, or obviously we have many executives of Fortune 1000 that watch DisrupTV. There are lots of events where Heather, moderates and speaks around the country regarding sustainability and innovation in that space. So please follow her at GreenBiz and her blogs and articles. And it's a great opportunity for you to learn about how your company can stay viable by actually having sustainability as a core value. So that was episode 158, 2 extraordinary guests. And next week we have episode 159. Our guests include Les Ottolenghi, EVP CIO at Caesars Entertainment, Melanie Katzman, PhD, author of Connect First, 52 Simple Ways to Ignite Success, Meaning, and Joy at Work, and one of our favorites, Brian Fanzo, who's a speaker and change evangelist, who will come and give us the Gen Z view of the fourth industrial revolution. Ray, final thoughts.
Yeah, you know what? It's really exciting what's going on out there. And what we're really seeing is not just the intersection of technologies, but the intersection of both monetization models and business models that are coming to bear, right? We used to go back 5 to 10 years ago, like in Tim's case, talk about, hey, it's an IoT project. And now today it's IoT, it's AI, it's a business model around water as a service, right? And that's really what's getting exciting, right? Digital transformation, it's still in its infancy, even though we started talking about this in 2009, 2010, but we're just at the beginning of this revolution. Just like cloud took about 10 to 20 years to take shape, we're in the same boat here with digital transformation. And when we start talking about a post-digital world and what's happening after that, it's going to be about networks and networks that are coming together. And that's what's really exciting. I mean, I've really seen these case studies. I mean, to me today, like talking to Tim, and we've been talking for the last 7 years, going through this whole journey that he's been putting, that he's been like learning about, he's been sharing with everybody about, right? And he's been open about it, about how to build this. And it's just so rewarding to be able to see this, 6, 7 years later, got a launch out, he's got customers, he's piloting, and that's just exciting. I don't know about you, Val, but that just gets me excited every day.
Yeah, well, when I met Tim 4 years ago at Constellation Connect Enterprise, your conference, where 300-400 of the best and brightest CXOs get together and share. And Tim, 4 or 5 years ago, it may have been 5 years ago, at least 4, talked about using sensors to manage water flow for both sustainability, efficiency, and energy savings. And I thought, wow, this guy is so far ahead of what businesses and companies are ready to do. And now, as you heard him mention, 30, 40 hotels in just the Boston area are piloting his incredible innovation. So November 4th through 7th, you're going to have Constellation Connect Enterprise again. What's the theme for this year? And will you have some of these BT 500, BT 150 innovators that you announced 2 weeks ago? Most of them are going to be at this conference. What are you going to talk about? What's the theme for this year's event?
The theme for this year's event is really taking us to the next level, really about insight exponential business models and really how we go from this post-digital divide to winner takes all networks. And we're seeing this happening right at the beginning. I mean, there is a massive gap between winners and losers, and you're seeing that too. These winner takes all markets are in play. How do we actually make sure that everyone has a chance to participate, and how do they know what their competitive advantage is based on their data that they bring, the insights that they bring, and these new networks that are actually emerging? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Of course, day one is talking about our cool technologies that are out there that are coming down the pike. We also have Alan Bellew, who's like one of the top economists in the world. He's going to be sharing his thoughts. We're inducting the BT 150 on day one. Day two, we actually have Tom Peters as the keynote, and we'll be talking about business models. We're talking about industries. We also have our big Supernova Awards dinner. And then day three with Annie McKee, who's talking about leadership. We're going to go through what leaders need to do to be successful in this new environment.
That's awesome. Last time you and I talked to Tom Peters, we streamed our conversation, and we've got 80,000 people that have watched that discussion. So I'm thrilled. I'm going to be there. And Tom Peters is, just Tom Peters alone is worth the ticket to the Constellation Enterprise Connect on November 4th through 7th. So if you're a CXO, it's a must attend event of 2019. All right, my friend.
Anything on your end, Vala? So.
I'm going to Australia end of this month, so I'm looking forward to meeting trailblazers on the other side of the world, and yeah, that's the big thing happening this month for me. I look forward to our show next week. We got again 3 extraordinary guests, and if it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye everyone.
Thanks everyone. Take care.